Good morning, everybody. Jim Feist and Joe Mac. Joe, how are you today, and how's everything in New York?
We're doing great. We've had a week here, or almost a full week, of the experts out there just manhandling the Jets and Giants. Obviously, it's been a bit of a sarcastic week for the local talk show people and newspaper people. But hey, we got Jets Giants. They've got a combined 3 wins. They're going into Sunday's game. It is not exactly New York's finest hour sports-wise, but that's consuming a lot of the talk in this neck of the woods right now.
You know, we talked the other day, we were offline, but we talked about when was the last time New York really had a great, a championship. And I think you said 2011.
That's right. Yeah, the 2011 football Giants. It was the second time that they had beat the Patriots, obviously, within 4 years in the Super Bowl. And we haven't had anything since. I mean, we had the Mets in the World Series in 2015. They got beat by a Kansas City Royal team that was better than the Mets. And, the Yankees have had some playoff runs, as we see, but they have not even been in the World Series since 2009. The basketball teams, okay, there's hope for the Nets, but I got to be honest with you, and I've lived in this area my whole life. There's some fans excited. Brooklyn's getting a couple of sellouts. Overall, even a bad Knicks team, 1-7 right now, a bad Knicks team still gets more hype and more publicity than the Nets. They've never won back the city. Maybe they will, but I don't think it's going to happen. And, as you and I were talking offline yesterday, the two teams that play at Madison Square Garden are just really jokes. Now, the hockey team, the Rangers, are rebuilding, so they've got a little bit of excuse. They had a nice little run there, a nice little window about 4 or 5 years ago, got to the Stanley Cup Finals. But this Knicks team is just a disaster. I mean, they're an absolute joke. Their over-under wins for the season, I think, was in the high 20s. And I was just reading an article that was about 10 days old. I had an old newspaper thrown out. Walt Frazier, the great Knick, who has been their color analyst for years on their TV cable station, he actually thought the Knicks were going to win 38 to 40 games this year, and they could play 200 games in this regular season. This Knicks team's not going to win 38 games, so it's bad. There's some bad stuff, and the football team's, like I said, really bad. In fact, I'm stealing this a little bit from a radio host yesterday. The Jets and Giants, their records since the start of 2017, straight up records. The Jets are 10-30. The Giants are 10-31. I mean, that's really, really awful. So anyway, that's what we got to look forward to on Sunday, 1:00 our time. So it should be a bash.
For as many sports teams as you have in New York, it's amazing that they haven't done better. Whatever the sport, it's just incredible. Well, we have some games. We got a game tonight. We got the Raiders hosting the Chargers, and this will be the last time the Chargers play a game in Oakland against the Raiders because the Raiders are moving here to Las Vegas. The Raiders have done a lot better this year than I expected. I didn't think they'd be that competitive this year, but they have done well. Offensively, they've done a lot better than they have defensively. And the Chargers have gotten some players back. They have a much stronger defense than the Raiders do. I mean, they have a lot of talent on defense. And it looks like the Chargers are coming back a little bit offensively with getting some players healthy.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, let's face it, the holdout by Melvin Gordon did not help matters. I mean, the other kid, Ekeler, did play well in his absence, but the Chargers were kind of digging out of a hole right from the get-go this season. But you're right; they're getting healthier. They're playing better. Their defense obviously played well, although I don't know what Green Bay was doing last week. That was the most befuddling game on that card, that the Packers' offense just didn't show up at all. But the Chargers are playing better. But you know what, Jim? I think the Chargers are one of about 5 or 6 teams in this league this week that really can't afford to lose. They can't afford to get too far under 500. Right now, the Chargers are 4-5. I'm looking at teams like the Bears, who are 3-5. The Titans are 4-5. Those teams can't afford, even if some of these divisions come back to them, they can't really afford to stay below the 500 mark by 2 games or more coming down the stretch. So this is a really important game for the Chargers tonight. Rivers has a history of playing well in this building. I read where he's won 9 of his 13 games there. He always seems to put together a nice stat line against the Raiders. And it's a really interesting game because Oakland's offensive line's a little banged up right now, and that rookie running back, I was going to call him a freshman, but the kid from Alabama, Jacobs, has really been much better than I thought. I guess I didn't see enough of him in college to get a real feel, but this kid is a pretty explosive runner. He seems like he gets his 100 yards just about every week. And if that offensive line was a little healthier, I think the Raiders have a little better chance. The game is basically a toss-up. The Chargers are favored by, I believe, 1.5 at last look. But on one hand, I say it's kind of a must-win for the Chargers, and on the other hand, it looks like it's going to be the Raiders' last primetime home game in that building. So you think they've got to face it a little heat to come through here. Good game, good entertaining game. Total is probably a touch higher than I would think, but who knows? Last week we saw in the NFL, the totals finally had a blowout type of week. They went 10-4 overall after really just kind of treading water all year. I think the number looks a little high as far as the total, but to me it's a toss-up game and should be a real entertaining game.
We have a game that I want to talk. It's not a really important game to you and I probably. It's every game is a betting game can be important if you decide to get involved. Buffalo, who's 6-2 on the season, goes on the road. They go to Cleveland, who is 2-6. Yet, because the Cleveland Browns were hyped up so much during the offseason and we're going to be the Super Bowl champions, etc., they have carried a big following, and unbelievably, here's a 2-6 team, a 3-point favorite over a 6-2 team.
Yeah, that's true. You and I have kicked around this game. I think you and I have a little bit of a disagreement on the Bills, at least. I know that their wins have not been against impressive teams, and even a couple of their wins have not been overly impressive. But I like the Bills right from the start of this year. I really thought they were going to be a 10 or 11 win team, and I'm sticking to that. But again, like you said, if you look at this number here, you've got a Bills team that's 6-2 straight up, and they're taking points against a terribly underachieving Browns bunch. And to me, I know I'm going to pass on that game. I'm not getting involved in it. If I'm the Bills, I'm concerned about a couple of things. I mean, on one hand, the rookie running back, Singletary, had a nice stat game last week, played well against the Redskins, but Frank Gore kind of looked shot. I mean, he had 3 chances from the 1-yard line to get in and couldn't last week. And again, with the Bills, you got to worry a little bit about their quarterback, Josh Allen. He's still a kid. He'll give you the occasional nice throw. He'll give you the occasional third and 5 scramble run for a first down. But he makes some, bad decisions at times. And again, the Browns, I put in that category of what I was just saying. There's about 5 teams in the league that this week they have to win. If they don't win, you could say that the Browns season is shot already, and it could be. But if they lose here, then they're playing out the string the rest of the way. So it's a much more important game right now for the Browns, and it almost looks like a game where they want you to play the Bills here, and I'm not going to fall into it, but I have to say, I do think the Bills are a quality team. I think they're a team that's going to make the playoffs, and we'll have to see how this one goes. I mean, as far as the Browns go, I mean, they seem to self-destruct. They shoot themselves in the foot at least once a game in the red zone or with a decision by the coach, Freddie Kitchens. They have found ways to lose games, this Browns team, and to me, they cannot afford one more loss the rest of the way.
Well, this is one of those teams that has awful management, awful ownership. They allowed the second-year quarterback to pick his head coach, who had never been a coach. He'd never been an offensive or defensive coordinator. He was a position coach, and it's turned into a disaster because you need someone strong to manage all those major egos they have on this roster, and they have a fantastic roster. But, you got a second-year quarterback that's got a big mouth. He He never shuts up. He does a lot of commercials, which I think is probably smart for him because he may never get a big contract in this league, so he might as well take the money and run from the commercials. You got.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you one other thing that he did in the game last week, Jim. That I read the game story. He convinced Kitchens, his coach, to challenge a play where Mayfield had fallen forward on a 4th and 1 and thought he got the first down. He convinced Kitchens to challenge it, and the challenge, it didn't go in the Browns' favor. So they lost an important timeout in the second half. And there was another example. Mayfield talked his way into that decision, which I know players in the league do all the time. They tell the coach, I got the first down, challenge it. But Mayfield challenged it. The replay showed that he didn't get it. And then Mayfield claimed that after the game he saw the replay and he still thought he got it. I mean, it's the same old monkey business. The players kind of talk their way into these inexperienced coaches to challenge a play. I mean, you lose a timeout in the second half of a game that you're down a touchdown. It's priceless, those things. And the other thing, and I know I'm terribly old school, and I know I watched Odell Beckham for 4 years here in this. I watched every game he played with the Giants. Listen, the guy has great skill. He can break a big play. You throw the ball to him in the middle of the field, he can go 80 yards. I am so tired of all the shenanigans. Last week it was shoes. Him and Jarvis Landry had different color shoes. Who cares? I mean, I don't really care what shoes guys wear. But then I read that Beckham wore these other black shoes that he had never worn in a game before. And after the game, he actually said, my feet were hurting me and I wasn't the same player. I mean, so you get your shoes taken away from you by what they call the NFL uniform police at halftime. You put on other shoes that you've never worn in a game. I mean, come on. It's so much silliness that goes around him and Mayfield. It's a joke. I mean, it's like they don't concentrate on the important thing, which is winning the ball game, I mean, instead, they got all this other stuff. So this year, if you think about it, Beckham has played a game where he wore a wristwatch, which was worth who knows how much. He's worn shoes that he's never worn before. He's twice been told to take the dark visor off, because, and then all the while he says the league is picking on him. I mean, this is what he was as a Giant player.
That was
much silliness.
That was
play the game.
The inmates are running the asylum because when you look at the NBA and you look at the load management bull that's going on out there, and and then you look at what's going on in the NFL. There's no discipline. There's no rule of law. Well, we don't have rule of law in a lot of areas in our country right now, but there's no rule of law. There's no the people that own the teams, manage the teams, the league commissioners. Nobody seems to have authority enough to straighten this bull stuff up. And we, the fans. I mean, we enjoy sports. We make our living betting sports. We have to overcome bad officials' calls and non-calls. It's kind of a mess, to be frank. It really is not anywhere near what I expected it to be. I thought things would get cleaned up. It's not. But I guess it has to hit bottom before it gets better.
I think you're right. I mean, you know what? The modern athlete is different than the athlete of years ago, and I mean, it seems kind of kooky when you think about it. You got a sport like football where, okay, lots of coaches way back when, Woody Hayes, or whoever you want to talk about, they were drill sergeants, Lombardi. Okay, it didn't always go over good with the players. If you ever listen to the old Packers teams, they used to say they couldn't stand Lombardi. But meanwhile, they were there to do a job. And now, so many coaches, so many organizations are worried about ruffling feathers from their players, especially their star players. I mean, it's like they want to have it like a love fest. I'm like, guys, maybe we don't need to go back to the 1960s and, have these guys with crew cuts yelling at their players from, an inch away. But this is crazy. I mean, you're right. The players just, right now, they've got too much power and too much say. I mean, we talked about the Jets and Giants a little while ago. Now, the Jet coach, Adam Gase, he has no control over this team right now. He doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. and he's let this whole thing spin out of control. I mean, this is the worst I've ever seen a pro football team be in this area in 30 or 40 years. And he basically doesn't want to upset anybody. He doesn't want to criticize Sam Darnold for playing poorly. He doesn't want to criticize, a secondary that gives up big plays. I mean, it's crazy. It's just a different way of doing business, and I don't think it's the right way to do business. I mean, I know these coaches, a lot of them, it's almost like the way the world has become. A lot of dads these days want to be friends with their kids. I understand that. But you know what? You got a job to do. I mean, Freddie Kitchens in Cleveland, okay, I give a lot of first-year NFL coaches a little bit of a mulligan, and I've thought that ever since Bill Parcells. Guys can come in and be overwhelmed. Give them 1 year. Let's see what they can do after that. But Freddie Kitchens, listens to his players, and look at the players we're talking about. Mayfield, who, like you said, he's just got a big mouth. Beckham, who's nothing but trouble. And Jarvis Landry, who, never got along with any of his coaches in Miami. So it's gone a bad way, and it's unfortunate because, I think if these coaches would have put these guys in place, the players might quit on them. I mean, it even happened with Odell years ago and Tom Coughlin. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. They played that game against Carolina, going after each other, spearing each other, everything. And Coughlin never took Odell out of the game. He never disciplined. He never even talked to him about it. I mean, the guy got about 3 or 4 personal foul penalties and was totally out of his mind on the field. Yeah, and Coughlin never did anything. So if Coughlin didn't do it, that showed you where we were headed, that coaches were not going to sit down their players and read them the riot act. It just doesn't happen.
Well, a lot of it has to do with the collective bargaining agreement and authority that the coaches don't have anymore. But we should probably spend a little time talking about some games. We got 2 big games in the Madison Square Garden the other night. The top 4 teams in the country, ranking-wise, they played 2 good basketball games. That was exciting. College basketball is back. It started on Tuesday, and we're going to have full cards of basketball from now till probably, including the NBA, probably till June. So it's going to be an exciting stretch. It's a lot of work for us, the handicappers. We've got a couple big games in the pros. We got Carolina going to Green Bay. Now, Carolina, the last time they were on the road, they got ruffled up in San Francisco, and but they bounced back with a win last week. Now they go to Green Bay, who really embarrassed themselves last week. I don't know what they were doing, if they were out partying or they didn't show up to the game. They certainly didn't play like the Green Bay Packers, and Aaron Rodgers wasn't even there, so to speak. But that's a big game. Game opened 6, down to 5.5. We got the Minnesota Vikings at Dallas, who roughed up the Giants the other night. Dallas is a 3-point home favorite. 48's the total. Minnesota might be without Thielen. That's a possibility. And Dallas has got some possible issues at wide receiver with Cooper sitting out practice. We don't really know what the result of that is. We got the Rams going to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, 3.5-point home dog. The Rams have not been the Rams of last year, but Pittsburgh, I mean, they are running around with their backup quarterback who's kind of marginal. Times he looks good, other times he doesn't. They won a game last week because Vinatieri Vinatieri missed a kick, and they lost. Indianapolis had lost their starting quarterback, but Hoyer came in and played pretty well. Threw 1 pick, but he threw 3 touchdowns. So we got an interesting card this week, and I've got Baltimore, who actually destroyed the Patriots the other night. The game was a little actually closer than it should have been. But if it wasn't for Baltimore turnovers, I don't know if... offensively, I think the Patriots only scored about 6 points in the game.
Yeah, I really thought... first of all, I was surprised that the Ravens came out like that. I mean, they just dominated early, up 17-0. But when you think about it, that game really kind of got decided on that one fumble by Edelman. I mean, he started to run upfield. They jawed the ball loose, picked it up, Humphrey, and ran it back for a touchdown. To me, that was game, set, match right there. The Ravens are showing me something, though. I mean, they're winning with this kid while he's still learning at quarterback. Jackson, he doesn't always throw the prettiest perfect ball, but he's good enough. And, it's starting to look like you and I were talking about this last week on the podcast. We were trying to find a second or third team in the AFC that might challenge the Patriots, and we were talking about the Chiefs, and even if Mahomes gets, 100% healthy by year end, which I doubt, their defense I don't trust, and we were just kicking around some other teams. Well, the Ravens kind of jumped to the forefront and let us know that they might be that next best team to the Patriots in the AFC. I mean, they're well coached. Their defense is playing pretty ferocious for the most part. And, they whacked Brady around on a couple of occasions, so they showed me something. But then you talk about the Pittsburgh situation. Obviously, without Roethlisberger since early in the year, the Bell and Brown era is long gone. I know Vinatieri terribly hooked that ball. The laces were facing him. It was a terrible, as the coach said, it was a terrible operation there. But Pittsburgh showed me something. I mean, could have been on death's door, and they got the 96-yard pick six by Fitzpatrick, who's been a godsend for them. And, the Steelers are hanging around, and I think they're going to give the Rams everything that they can handle here. It's funny, you're right, the Rams have not been what we thought. Meanwhile, they've not been a bad point spread team at all. They've won their backers' money and everything, but they just haven't had the same electricity. Todd Gurley's not what he was, we all know that. Cooper Kupp has been tremendous this year. I mean, you got to put him in the top 5 or 6 in the league, honestly, in MVP right now. But the Steelers are showing me something. They're showing me some fight. I've been a little between here and there on Mike Tomlin in the last few years. There's times I think he's a solid coach up to an elite coach, and there's times that I say, boy, I think he's an average coach. But he's getting what he can out of this team. He's going with this kid Rudolph, who's very wet behind the ears. He's had his share of injuries. They're showing me something. I would not be shocked if they pull a little mild upset at Heinz Field. And again, it might come down to kicking. So you might have Zerline of the Rams trying a 45, 50-yarder into that one end of the stadium where seemingly nobody can ever kick a field goal. So I think Pittsburgh's alive in the race for a playoff spot, and I think very much alive as a mild upset hope this week.
Well, I agree with you. It's an interesting card. That's an interesting game. We got a game on Monday night that we should probably touch on before we sign off here in a few minutes. Seattle is traveling, and they're going to bring along Russell Wilson, I think, for this game. And they're traveling down to the 8-0 San Francisco 49ers. And that's a big game for both teams. Much more so for Seattle because they're not 8-0. Because the NFC is loaded with good teams, and you don't want to mess up too much, or you just won't get in the playoffs. But that is one hell of a game. I can't wait to see it.
It is a big time game. And my first thought at looking at the number there, I see 6.5 right now, is I thought that looked a little tall here. I thought the number would be more like 4.5. I realize the 49ers have been great this year, unbeaten. The defense is fantastic. Probably the best or second best defense in this league, obviously with the Patriots. I thought the number looked a little high, but I got to tell you, I don't know if it's really wise to bet against this 49er team right now. I mean, that defensive front is amazing. Bosa is playing great. You really have a quarterback who, you know what, give him his time and give him his space, and he's gonna put up big numbers. He showed a lot in that win over Arizona. He really had a lot of moxie. I mean, he made some big third down passes late in that game. I know they didn't cover that number, but that being said, give him a little bit of time, and he's he could be top 10 top 10, top 12 quarterback in this league. That's all I'm going to say about the Niners. I used to have a saying when you went against top flight teams and everything, no one gets rich betting against that's my feeling right now. Nobody's going to get rich trying to bet against this 49er team as it's constituted right now. I would probably be leaning in that direction, lay the home chalk. I know a lot of people still wondering, are they for real and everything? I think they're starting to answer those questions. I think they are for real. And let's face it, Russell Wilson is who he is. Great comeback again the other day. I mean, another dramatic finish, an overtime win against Tampa Bay. But you start to wonder as we get deeper into the season if it still just keeps landing on Russell Wilson to save their bacon every week. Gets a little tough. I mean, he's going to have a game here or there where his numbers aren't good, or he's going to have a game, maybe this is the one, where he gets sacked a handful of times. I mean, I know he's like Houdini back there, but he's not going to escape every pass rush. So Seattle's got a bone up in some other areas. Their defense left a lot to be desired against Tampa Bay last week. So we'll see what team comes out. You know, I could see this being a game where the Niners win double figures and really are not even challenged in the last 10 minutes of this game. But I think they're for real, and I think, like I said, betting against them the rest of this way, I don't think is a good move.
Well, maybe not. You know, they played very well. They destroyed the Panthers, but they struggled with Arizona. Arizona has that mobile quarterback, like a Russell Wilson type of quarterback. We'll have to see. I mean, right now, you'd have to look at the rosters and you'd have to say San Francisco has a much better defense. Their running game also looks superior. But it comes down to Russell Wilson, you know, against Garoppolo. But then you look at the coaching, and even though Carroll has been around 100 years and done really well, you can't knock Kyle Shanahan. I mean, this guy is a miracle worker. So it's going to be a hell of a game. I can't wait to watch it. We're running out of time, Joe. We're running to that magic 27, 28 minute level. But Joe, what do you have going to Jim Hurley this week?
All right, the Jim Hurley Network, obviously, we're going to be busy, like you said before, Jim. We got a lot of action. We got basketball action, college basketball. We're off to a nice start in the NBA. We've cashed with, a bunch of plays lately, taking dogs that have won outright. But, of course, it's still very much the heart of the football season. Going to have a lot on tap. As everyone sees, there's football every night of the week now. The Mid-American Conference plays every, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Primetime games all over. Obviously, LSU, Alabama. We're definitely going to have a selection on that game on Saturday. So give us a call. The toll-free number is 1-800-323-4453. Again, it's 1-800-323-4453. Or else you can get the plays online at jimhurley.com. That's Jim, Hurley.com. We've been around since 1985, cranking out winners all those years. Like I said, we're off to a good start in the NBA. College is early. We did have Kentucky the other night, taking a couple of points against Michigan State, so that was a nice win. We're going to be cashing a lot this weekend in football and on the hardwood. 1-800-323-4453.
All right, Joe, thank you very much. We'll talk again next week.
Sounds good, Jim. Enjoy the games.
You too. Bye. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. We ran a little long today, but I guess we had to get a couple things off our chest. But anyway, thank you for listening, and make sure you visit jimfeist.com as well. Thank you.